Yeah, if only it was that easy. So I kind of want to, I guess, feed in now the sort of Richard Swinburne thing we spoke about before and talk about um, almost like kind of psychological bias. And I want to use another example before we hit Richard Swinburne. So I'm preparing at the moment to speak to another philosopher for the second time, a gentleman called Michael Humer, who's written some great books over in the States. He has this idea called phenomenal conservatism, which he's come to just from as he presents it, an evidential, logical way. He's kind of come to this because it's the most common sense, rational thing that he believes, and he kind of presents it within the space of epistemology. It's a really interesting view. We don't need to dive into it, but what I find interesting after talking to Michael, getting ready for this show, is many theists also think it's a fantastic view because it kind of confirms or backs up their positions as well. So they've kind of taken this sort of not secular, but this sort of kind of common sense way of viewing things, and they've decided to kind of adopt it or pull it in because for them it backs up the sort of, and it pushes against things like radical skepticism and these sorts of things. And I kind of guess I want to then kind of feed in this sort of Richard Swinburne idea, not to kind of, isolate him or kind of pick on him, but just as an example of individuals kind of creating or utilizing frameworks around them to actually enable their already held convictions and beliefs, whether that be about God or something else, to stand firmer. So they kind of pull things in to present robust views which just confirm or reconfirm what they already held to be the case. I think we all do this, and it's really hard sometimes to spot that's happening within ourselves. So we can point to others quite easily and point to the speck in that person's eye and miss the log on our own, to use a biblical analogy. So would you mind speaking a little bit around this sort of psychological bias and how we're all susceptible to that and how potentially we can begin to overcome it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very difficult one. I think one thing we got to appreciate the fact is that it is a good thing in certain ways that we seek to bring coherence to our different views, right? And, our views don't stand or fall independently, they do fit together. So, whether you believe one thing or not is going to affect whether you believe one thing or another. And I think a lot of the time, what people who are secular or atheists don't appreciate about theists is there are certain kind of beliefs they have, which, given they believe those, it's not going to be too difficult to accommodate other things that we wouldn't, where we come from, don't think are very plausible. So, the probability that, what's the probability that the universe was created by chance or with purpose? Well, if you already got, you think, independent reasons for believing in a theistic God, then your Bayesian, everyone's talking about Bayesian priors here. Your prior, the probability that there is indeed a purpose to it is already going to be much more plausible than someone whose starting assumption is that, well, I don't see any reason to believe there's a theistic God. So we do kind of think things together, and so therefore it's true. If you have so let's say you are, I think religious people do this all the time. They're religious, they have these prior religious beliefs, so they read certain things about natural science, and they ask themselves the question, does this fit my, can I make this fit my theistic commitments? And often they find that they can, right? And that's great for them. When is it wrong? When it's wrong is that I think the point is that two things. First of all, people do tend to sometimes confuse being compatible with supporting, right? Which is two different things. Almost any views can be made compatible if you are ingenious enough about explaining anomalies. It's not the same as saying that they support them. So I find this really interesting with physics. I mean, I kind of think when anyone ever brings in sort of quantum physics to justify any kind of belief which isn't about quantum physics or something closely related, be very suspicious, because physicists themselves say it's hard to make sense of what it means. But there are people, you hear people say that, quantum non-locality, or whatever it might be, actually supports say belief in psychic powers or telekinesis or something. Well, it doesn't. It's compatible with it, but it doesn't support it actually, because nothing we know about the way these effects works tell us how telekinesis is supposed to work, for example. It opens up a possible explanation, but we don't have any. But the key point about it is we have no evidence that stuff works. All the experiments that have tried to show people doing it, it just doesn't work. So going back to Hume again, a weaker evidence can never destroy a stronger. So I think people don't get carried away by the fact they realise that their beliefs could be made compatible with some kind of fact about the world, and that leads them to over celebrate because they think it actually supports it. So the second thing is that not only is it the case that sometimes things can be compatible without actively supporting, the other thing I think people do miss is that on balance, a belief, although it may be compatible, fits much better with an alternative set of beliefs than it does with yours. So what examples might we give here? Well, let's say the fact that let's say we accepted the fact, which I don't, that the chances that intelligent life emerged on Earth are so implausible that there must be some kind of purpose, or some purpose in some sense. It had to sort of be some purposive in some way. Even if that were true, the idea that this supports belief in, say, most versions of the Christian theistic God seems to be a huge, huge leap. Because what it shows is that this universe has been chosen to evolve in such a way that involves such huge amounts of gratuitous suffering and waste and all that kind of the kind of thing a theistic God is supposed to be against. So it's hugely implausible that that's what it's compatible with or supports. And then I think there are other things we could probably think of where certain scientific views, although compatible with religious beliefs, they fit much more happily with a non-theistic belief. So how do we ensure that so trying to tie this together a bit, one reason it's so difficult to compensate for this is that we are naturally going to want to sort of try and bring our beliefs into harmony and reconcile them. And in fact, we should be trying to do that. The thing to do is to go back to the paying attention stuff. We need to be really attentive though and really ask ourselves the honest question, yeah, okay, but in the round, is this thing, is it more or less supportive of my prior beliefs or not? If I'm honest, does it make my total set of beliefs less likely rather than more? And being prepared to live with the fact that, and that may not be a reason to give up your other beliefs, by the way, but it would be a bit convenient if everything that came along was unequivocally supportive of one's beliefs. I think in a way, it's always a good sign of someone's intellectual honesty. They're willing to admit the fact there are certain things in the world which do make their position somewhat difficult or problematic, at the very least. And I think we ought to acknowledge that. I mean, I think around the lack of ultimate meaning and purpose in the universe, for example. Actually, I don't think that's intellectually difficult to accept at all. But like a lot of atheists, I can explain why I think that doesn't matter and why we can still have meaningful and purposeful lives. But I can also accept the fact that that for some people it just doesn't seem to do it. It does create a bit of an absence, which for some people find hard to fill. And the reason for that is not simply that that they're missing something intellectually important. Maybe there is at some level potentially something emotionally disturbing about the fact that it is all just going to end and there is no purpose. So you talk about the atheism book. I kind of think that atheists have to kind of be honest about the fact there is, although on balance, I think you can have a positive worldview as an atheist, there is a dark side, and we have to be honest about that and not just pretend that, oh no, it's all fine. The fact that everyone's going to die and that some people just lived lives of misery with no redemption is just, we're cool with that.
If you enjoyed this clip, then head on over to Locals to access the full conversation right now. Supporters can access the video version, and everyone can access the audio-only version of the conversation. I'll see you over there.